Okay guys, let's check out the T-Rax plugins now. There's a lot of them in the collection, 38 in total. So I can't in one video look at them all in any detail. So let's start by just looking at some features that are common to all the plugins. And then we'll quickly go through and show all the plugins in the collection, a little bit of information about each one. And then after that we can start doing little videos showing them in more detail with some audio and all the rest of it, right? So let's start by looking at the collection. So, let's load one of them up. Okay, this is one of the APIs. It's an emulation of a 550A, simple 3-band EQ. Now all of the plugins have this top bar across here, with this wonderful undo and redo. So let's say I'm doing an EQ on something, like, you know, and I think, yeah, I quite like that. Let me just try a little variation here. And I'm listening as I'm doing this. I'm focusing on the music, and you know, I'll try a little bit of a higher shelf, a little bit more boost on that. I'm going to just drop my low mid boost there, and I'm going to switch from 50 to 40 hertz, a little less cut. And then I think, yeah, oh, but I'd like to get back to what I had before. Well, just undo, 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 undo. And there I am. I'm back where I started. Redo, 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 undo, undo, undo. Yeah, it's fantastic. Any time you can just undo. And if you've forgotten what it was at before you tweaked, you can get back to it. Brilliant, right? And then across on this side, all the plugins have this wonderful 4 banks. Now, I've set this EQ curve, this EQ setting, on whatever it is. And I think, yeah, I like that. But I'd like to try a variation on that. Well, now this is the settings I've got in bank A. So I copy with the copy button. The other 3 banks flash, and I can click on any of those and paste the settings I've got here in A into B, C or D. So I'll copy to B, bam. And now A and B are identical. And now on B, I can change it. I'm going, well, let's try a slightly higher shelf, a little bit more boost. I'm going to bring up this 600 hertz a little bit, and less cut at the bottom end. In fact, just 1 dB of boost. And then while the material is playing through the plugin, I can switch between those 2 variations and audition them. It's fantastic. Now you can have up to 4 banks. So let's say you set up a vocal EQ. You could save it as a preset, load it up, copy it over and make adjustments for different types of vocalists. And then you could save them all individually. Yeah, either you just go through the variations, choose the one you want and save it as just a one-off, or you can have 4 different types and save them all individually. To save anything you've set up, you just go to the menu, save as, and it saves a preset right next to the library ones to use in any project. So I could start with a vocal EQ that I've set, copy it to B, tweak it, copy it to C, tweak it, copy it to D, tweak it, and then have 4 different types and save them individually. And then, you know, A could be rock vocals soft, B rock vocals harder, C soul vocals softer, D soul vocals harder, etc. You know, it's great to be able to switch between and compare 2 different, slightly different settings. Brilliant idea. Okay, also at the bottom of every plugin you get a question mark. Click on that, it opens the manual, really handy. And you get the shopping cart icon. Now you click on that and a little box opens. And in that box is the custom shop. And then you can just, from inside your sequencer, while you're working, without leaving your sequencer, you can go to the shop, log into your account and instantly activate the trial period on any plugin. 14 days unrestricted use. Or just click and buy it from inside the sequencers. Clever idea. Okay, then finally, on all the plugins there is this wonderful reset switch. Bam, just reset, quick and fast, you're ready to start from scratch. And also, every plugin, where relevant to the type of plugin, and obviously if it's on a stereo track, you've got mid-side and left and right processing. So left-right's the default with the equal button in and lit. So when you're applying your EQ or compression, you're affecting both sides of the signal equally. But you can process the left and right differently. That's quite clever. Different left, different right, or equal, both the same, whatever I tweak. Or you can switch to mid-side processing. Again, with equal in, you're processing mid and side the same. But you can have different mid setting to side setting. And that's on every plugin. That's fantastic. Brilliant stuff. And then finally, there's the quality of the graphics. Now, I know it doesn't make a difference to the sound, but it really is nice to work with a really nicely designed GUI. And you can make these things as big as you want. Even on like big 4K monitors, they don't degrade. Beautiful, beautiful graphics. And one thing did make me chuckle. If you really make the plugin big and you focus on, you know, one of the pots, well, clearly you can see the light is shining onto this, onto the pots from this angle. So the shadows are all this side. And if you just look, you can see that the light is reflecting on the leading edge of the pot. And as you rotate the pot, the reflections stay on that leading edge. That's quite clever. I quite like that sort of almost bonkers attention to detail. Yes, it makes no difference to the sound, but they are. It just makes it really nice to work with them. Okay, so that's some general stuff. Let's start looking at the collection just quickly. Okay, so we'll kick off with the APIs. There's 3 API emulations. The 550A, simple 3-band EQ. The 550B, the bigger brother with 2 mid-bands. And the 650 graphic. Great little graphic, this 10-band octave graphic. Now, all of these APIs, the input works as regular input level, more or less. But if you switch in the preamp button, then it's seeking to emulate the preamp on these API units for which they are famous. So you get an emulation of the drive of the preamp. And all these APIs have got proportional Q, even the graphic, meaning the more you boost, the more you cut, the peakier that band gets. Yeah? Very nice. Good stuff. You can kind of think of these as the American Neves almost, right? Very sought after EQs from the old days, but they're still made today, standalone or lunchbox. Great little units. Good stuff. That's your 3 APIs. As I said, you can think of them as almost like the American Neves, and then we do have some Neve emulations. We've got the 1073. This is my absolute favourite. Very simple 3-band EQ, low shelf, mid band, and a fixed high shelf at 12K. You've got a low cut which rolls off at 18 dB an octave. And they've also sought to emulate the Marinier transformer preamps on these things, which you can switch into line or mic mode, and they've done a really good job of it. You do get that real nice harmonic, edgy, slightly drive, subtle or hard. Yeah, great little EQ, fantastic. And we also get its bigger brother, the 1081, which just adds 2 mid bands, and the high shelf has a frequency selector. You've got a low cut and a high cut as well here. Also, the high shelf and low shelf can be switched to peak mode, and the 2 mids can be switched to high Q, so they've got a tighter Q to start with. Now, both of these units in real life, they do proportional Q. The more you boost or cut, the peakier they get. They've reproduced that. One thing that is, I just noticed a slight bug, which is on this one, on the high mid, they've got the frequencies here incorrect. In the manual, it lists these three frequency selections correctly, but somebody in the design team just copied the last 3 frequencies from the 1073 and then put it over here, and it's incorrect. It goes from 3.3, I think it goes to 3.9, 4.6 or something, and 5.2 or something like that. So these 3 bands are incorrectly listed on the GUI. I've written to IK about it. But they are correct in the emulation. Anyway, a couple of great little EQs. Lovely jubbly. You've got the Neves and the APIs. Some of the most sought after little preamps and EQs. Okay, now you've also got the famous Pultec Eq P1i. Again, one of the most famous EQs. Very simple 2-band affair. You've got a low frequency selector, just 4 selections of frequency, and then you boost that frequency area, or you cut. You don't have a single control which is cut one way from 12 o'clock and boost the other way from 12 o'clock. You have 2 separate controls. Choose my frequency, boost or cut. And at the high end you've got a 7-way switch to select the frequency, again, boost or cut. Now this Pultec EQ, great on acoustic guitars, vocals, things like that, drums. And it does a trick. We'll look at that in more detail when we start looking at the plugins individually and listen to some stuff. You choose a low frequency for something like your kick drum, right? And you boost and cut at the same time. Now these don't cancel each other out. They just have the effect of really focusing on the selective frequency. You can get like mega deep kick drum and stuff like that. Really cool. This is a great EQ and a classic. Okay, so that's all like the classic channel EQs. There is another EQ. This is another emulation of a famous EQ. The old Sontec 432 mastering EQ. Now really you'd use this in the mastering suite. Or you could use it on a master output bus. Or even a group bus maybe, but I don't think I would. It's incredibly detailed. Very fine frequency switching on the bands. These things are almost impossible to find. Company went out of production. I think they were made in the 70s or something. I think George Massenberg was in. He wasn't the main designer, but I think he was involved in the company. Can't remember the name of the guy who designed it. But it's another emulation. Great EQ. Very fine detail. Generally used for mastering though. So that's your EQs. And then we've got classic compressors. Starting with the Fairchild 670. Again, one of the most famous compressors in the world. Okay, this originally started life as it was designed really for EQing at the cutting stage when you're cutting the lacquer to make a single or an album or something, right? Hence the controls are labelled left and right or lateral and vertical, because lateral and vertical is your centre for the centre frequencies and left right, and you could compress them differently to make sure that the needle wasn't jumping out, wasn't going out, getting out of control on the lateral and vertical differently. And this is used, on mix buses and master outputs for its famous magic that it does. Hence, there's a preset 1 dB of 670 magic. You just stick this on a master out or a bus, and it just gives this wonderful presence. These things have like a mega fast attack time, something ludicrous like 50,000th of a second. And bear in mind that 1 millisecond, which is typically the lowest unless you go to 0 on a digital plug-in compressor, 1 millisecond is usually the lowest attack, and that's 1,000th of a second. I'm pretty sure this had something bonkers like 50,000th of a second attack. All valve. So, and then on these two settings, like 5 and 6, you've got very, very long release time. I think about 20 to 30 seconds on 6. So it wouldn't let go of the compression. So that you get just a little tiny bit of gain reduction going on, a little bit of compression, which it won't let go. So it's holding compression all the time, but within that compression, every little transient, whether slight or large, keeps its energy. It just has wonderful life, giving it this wonderful kind of presence. It's just a credible thing. They've done it really well, and it's a great unit to have in your collection. And then we've got two more classics, the Universal Audio 1176 emulation, blackface. You got ratio 4:1, 8:1, 12:1, 20:1 limiting, and you can do the all buttons in trick, which gives monstrous compression. One of the classics, great sound. And then we've got also the LA2A emulation. This is a Teletronics LA2A. Again, one of the most sought after compressors in the world, only 2 controls, gain and peak reduction. But it's got a sound, it really has. And you can switch between limit and compress. Fantastic. They've all got a different sound, these compressors. They're really good. Great little unit. Okay, and then we have another one. This is an emulation of a Manley vari-mu. They still make these. A very, very highly respected compressor. I love this. This is my go-to now for slapping good tight compression, or even something subtle on a drum, a bass, whatever. And you just stick it on and it just does it before you even have to tweak anything. So you just stick it on, it bam, good tight compression. No artifacts at all. You can make it pump and really be noticeable. But it's got this quality of super tight, lovely attack with the most infinitesimal amount of gain reduction. Then you just give it a little tweak. Great little unit, fantastic, love this. Okay, next, I've included this in the classics. I'm convinced it's based on a famous old unit. I can't think what, it might be a Focusrite. It's an optical compressor. Great sound. You can drive it really hard and it'll breathe and pump like mad, completely with a different character to the 1176 or the 2A or the Fairchild if you drive those. It's an optical compressor. You can set the release, but opticals do have a kind of program dependent release. The more you drive over threshold, the longer the release takes. This is lovely. It'll work hard and give you wonderful pumping stuff, but use it subtly on a vocal or guitar bus or acoustics or something. Beautiful, smooth, lovely, gentle compression. A great little unit. And that's all the standalone EQs and compressors. And then we've got 2 of the world's most famous bus compressors. Bonus, we've got the famous Ssl Buss Compressor. And this is famous for its glue, hence one of the presets is the glue. Now they got a sound, these Ssl Buss Compressors. It's like the attack is, it's kind of like a very converse kind of type attack, like that. A bit like if you're doing a pitch envelope on an analog kick drum. You know, if you set it really tight with a really sort of converse decay, really tight, it kind of goes like that. And if it's a longer release or decay, it kind of just goes right. And this has got that super tight sort of suck down. And it's just got a sound. It's just fantastic. Beautiful. It really does add the glue. But you've also got the Neve emulation, the 33609. It's different to the SSL. It's got a fixed 3 milliseconds attack. It doesn't clamp down with quite that sort of converse type of or concave sort of like that. It's a bit more rounded. Beautiful bus compressor. Use this on all sorts. You know, drum buses. A bit softer in the attack than the bus compressor. Doesn't have the same glue. Great little complement to have with the SSL. You've got the best of both. It's got a limiter built in as well. You can compress and limit, or just compression, or just limiting. Lovely, lovely. Okay, so that is all the EQs and compressors in the what I'd sort of call emulations. Apart from, there is one other emulation, this tape echo emulation, which is brilliant. It's an emulation of an old Echoplex. Great little tape echo, really superb. I love this on vocals. Yeah, some on the left, some on the right, just coming up in the mix, so you can't even almost detect that it's an echo, but it just gives the vocal all this life and lifts it out. Brilliant, brilliant, great little emulation there. Okay, but we've also got 2 full channel strips emulations. We've got 2 SSLs. We've got the 4000E, which you can use in brown knob or black knob mode. Brown knob mode was the original, and then after George Martin asked for some modifications, they brought the black knob version out. Slightly tighter Q, slightly more cut or boost, And you really can hear the difference when you switch between the two. It's subtle, but you can hear it. And this is fantastic. It's a great little emulation. It's a great thing to have in your armoury. Because the 4000E, it changed the sound of music, really, didn't it? I mean, if you think about pop and pop rock and rock through the 70s, it had a slightly looser sound. And then once we got into the 80s, when this desk was introduced in the early 80s, once it got established, just about every producer wanted one to mix on. If you didn't have one, you wouldn't get your studio booked if it was a big, pro studio used by, well-known producers and labels. And yeah, sure, you could tracking through the SSL 4000. It was a completely different design, all in line and everything. But the EQ in combination with the gate and the compressor, very detailed, beautiful, tight and smooth EQ in combination with the fantastic gate and the famous SSL channel compressor gives you can get such a tightness out of things you wouldn't believe. Such a beautiful, tight, focused sound. And this is why music became tighter in the 80s. Suddenly there was this sort of super tightness to things. It was down to this channel. Absolutely brilliant. I'll show you more when we do some videos next, looking at them in more depth with some audio. And they've emulated the drive as well on the preamp. Look, I've got the console one with the 4000E emulation, and this is and that emulation is a co-design, Softube worked with SSL to get it right on the money, and it's got the SSL name on it. To my ears, this is in the ballpark with it. It's got the sound, right? Fantastic, great addition to have in your armoury. But you also get the 9000K, completely different channel. Now this comes from the it was a mixer that SSL brought out, featuring their trademarked super analog technology, I think it was called, and it was they designed it to be the most pristine, wide bandwidth, most cleanest mixing desk ever. Hence the trademark super analog technology. It was, I believe, a capacitor-free design, and it exhibited almost negligible distortion, almost negligible phase shift, and it went super low, right down. The bottom shelf goes down to 40 Hz, and the top shelf goes right up to 22K. Massively wide bandwidth, and particularly at the bottom end, this sort of lack of phase shifting meant you could get super deep, very phase coherent bottom end, and at the top the most highest sort of sugar frosting at the top, icing sugar. Now it was designed really for the most pristine recording, classical, jazz, world music, things like that. But because of that super clean quality and the ultra high icing sugar at the top, but really mainly because of the totally sort of phase tight, deep bottom end it would give, you could get earth-shattering, super tight, clean bottom end out of this. So it became quite popular with R&B producers and some hip-hop producers. Slightly different gate, more detailed. You've got a hold control as well as release for much more accurate gating. And the channel compressor isn't the same as on the 4000E. It's, let's say, a cleaner compressor. It doesn't slurp down. Great, great, great channel to have. It's good to have them both. And again, I've got the SSL approved emulation of this with my Softube console one, and to me this is in the ballpark. It's there with it. They might not sound absolutely, totally identical, but it's there. You've got it with this. Brilliant stuff. Okay, there's all your classic emulations, and let's look at just the last stuff. Well, there are 4 reverbs, and I didn't think when I looked at this collection, I was mostly focusing on the old emulations that I wanted. And I saw that the package had 4 reverbs in, but I thought, well, I don't need reverbs, but hey, they're in there, so what? But you know what? I'll tell you, I haven't got into the... there's 4 reverbs. This one does strange inverse type effects, reverse reverbs. This does rooms and small chambers. And this does halls, and they're all really cool, but this has blown me away. I haven't got into the other 3 so much. That's to come, right? But this one I've spent a bit of time with. This plate is phenomenal. It just reminds me of the old days when I used to work in hardware studios with old lexicons and AMSs, those kind of things. And this absolutely blows the Space Designer, which is the big main reverb in Logic. It blows it out of the water for the plates. The Space Designer uses convolutions mostly for the plates. Whereas this is like working with an old AMS or lexicon or something. You've got all the controls. And it's super detailed. And this has got that plate sound down. Really lovely granular sound with that beautiful plate decay. And it's super deep with what you can adjust. Not only that, you've got a full modulation matrix, and that's on all of the these reverbs. A full modulation matrix. You can assign either any of the two LFOs or the two envelopes to any destination with a minimum and maximum value and a curve. You've got different wave types for the LFOs: noise, square, saw, triangle, or sine wave, and the rate. Yeah, fantastic. And there's also macros, which I haven't got into yet, where you can use the sliders to morph between different values. I've got to get into all this, but just the sound of this plate, this is the one I've really been focusing on. The others I need to look at. They do sound good, just quick auditioning, but I need to get into them more. But this plate is just fantastic. I'm getting a bit enthusiastic, but but it is. Oh my God, I love this plate. There is no comparison between this and the Space Designer in Logic. It's superb. So you get 4 really good reverbs. More to come on those when we start looking at stuff with some audio after this. Okay, so that's the 4 echoes, or sorry, reverbs. Okay, then there's the 4 T-Rax classics. Now these are the original IK Multimedia designs. They go back a long way. No doubt they've been updated and tweaked. And these just are good, solid, do what they say, out of the tin units. There's a classic multiband limiter. There's a classic EQ with the low and high cut, low and high shelf, and 2 mid peak bands. And there's a classic compressor and a classic clipper. They all really good, competent units, really nice. And then we got the quads. There's 3 of them. There's a quad compressor, different bands. Each band could be compressed. You know, it's a multi-band compressor. You can compress the different bands with different amounts of gain, attack release ratio, threshold, etc. And you've got a quad limiter, just the same, but a limiter. And this one is really interesting. There's a quad imager. Divide up the bands and give it different bands different amounts of stereo width. Obviously, at the bottom end, you want to keep really centered, almost mono. And the higher up you go, the more spread. But you can give different spreads of different frequency bands, which you can adjust. This is a very clever one. Really cool. So they're the 3 quads. Nice. And then we got these others. There's the T-Rax 1. And this loads up as the default and only processor in the mastering suite when you load up the default basic preset. That's a very clever little unit of IK Multimedia's own design, because it gives you a bit of everything in one unit. Now this would be fantastic on group buses in your sequencer. Over here you've got 3 controls. Body, focus and air. Right, this is the bottom end, body. This is the focus, the kind of presence area in the upper mids trebles. And this is your top end air. Then you've got a general compression amount, more push, and a width control. And a volume control, right? But over here you've got this bass punch. Now I'm guessing, because this does what it says on the tin, push up, getting more and more bass punch. I'm guessing that this is tied into the main compressor. But it's kind of like a multi-band bass only. I'm not sure what the cutoff point is. Compressing just the bass end more and more to give you more bass punch. And then the transients control does what it says. More and more transients. So this is I'm just guessing it's probably tied in again to the compressor, perhaps to the attack, and maybe the release as well. Maybe more upper frequencies, or maybe it's all of them, but it does what it says. You know, more transients or not. And then finally got this analog control. give it a bit more analog feel. It's a very clever unit, this. Very versatile. Try it out on your buses particularly, it would be good for. And then we got this one, the Equalizer, or Equal. And this is very clever. You can have different bands, just one or more, and you've got lots of different shapes for the bands, including this tilt. A little bit like the Tonelux tilt from Softube, right? You can choose a tilt pivot frequency, and then you've got a tilt EQ. Tilt it one way, you're reducing the bottom end and raising the other end. Tilt it the other way, it lowers the top end and boosts the bottom end. It's quite clever. Very versatile, this. I've really got to get into this. I haven't played with this at all, but a great addition to have in your armoury. Then there's a Brickwall limiter. Does what it says on the tin. Good solid Brickwall limiting with different styles. Good stuff. And then we've got a saturator. And this is quite a cool one. Does all sorts of different saturation, from tape saturation to different kind of distorted type saturations to fully broken up type stuff. Really cool. And then we got a very nice De-Esser, which you can use in 2-band, and then you just adjust the width of that band. Or 3-band, where you can then move it around and focus it on one area. Very nice. You can adjust the slope for the gain reduction. And it's got a soft or normal DS type. Amount of release. How much de-essing is actually happening. And you can listen in different modes. You can listen to the actual de-essing, or that's just normal pass-through. You hear the whole thing with the de-essing occurring. Or you can tune in. You can listen to the band you're tuning into as you set it. Really nice de-esser. And then we've got a linear phase EQ. Very comprehensive. And then we've got a couple of odd ones. We got this mic room. Now I've tried this briefly, and actually it did work. I've got to get into it a bit more. The idea is you choose ballpark what kind of mic you recorded on. There's different types: dynamics, ribbons, etc., etc. Large condensers, valves, etc., etc. I think that's an old C12, isn't it, out there? Neumann, different Neumanns, whatever. And you then can apply a different type of mic to it. Now, primarily this would be for vocals, but it actually does work. It's quite clever. And it just transforms the sound of the original mic into the sound of the target mic, the best as it can. You can adjust the gain. You can adjust the harmonics, and also there's a clever proximity control, because mics, they've got a different sound depending on the proximity. Yeah, it works. I'll have to sort of spend a bit more time with it, but very interesting one, that. And then there's the master match. Well, this you'd only use in the mastering suite, but this is part of the collection. We looked at this briefly when we looked at the mastering suite standalone in the previous video. The idea is you load in some reference files, it analyses them and then seeks to apply that curve to your own material. But really you'd use this in the mastering suite. And that leaves just the stealth limiter, very stealthy. I love this, it's totally invisible. A very, very, very good comprehensive, almost, well, it is an invisible limiter. With lots of features. I've got to get into this more. We'll listen to this when we start listening to some examples. The metering in the mastering suite can be loaded as a standalone plugin in its own right, so that's another one of the plugins, giving you super comprehensive metering on anything you want, on usually buses and outputs. Great stuff. And then finally, the entire suite, the entire mastering suite, as the same as it is when it works standalone, can be loaded as a plugin onto a master out or a group bus. Now you can load one of the presets or build a chain on a bus or master output. Yeah, it actually works as a plugin, and that's it. That's the last one. It actually functions as a plugin, so really it's 38 plus this. Whew, it's a lot, huh? There's your collection. So that gives you some idea about the collection, a little bit of preamble on them. And some of the features common to all the plugins. And those are very good features. You know, this wonderful undo and redo, the bank copying, and easy to just get the plug-in, switch on the trial period or buy the thing, just bam, open up, do it. And the wonderful mid-side and left-right processing options on every one of the plugins where relevant on a stereo track. And of course the very quick reset button, easy preset saving, bam, boom, all done, bing, bang, bong. Yeah. So there's your collection. Now, let's move on and we'll start to look at them in a bit more depth. I'm really going to just look at the classics. Yeah. With some audio examples and look at them in a bit more depth so you can kind of hear the kind of things going on. All right? See you for that one. Or those ones, because there's going to be more than one.